too lazy to crow for day. I am the little red rooster, too lazy to crow for day. Keep everything in the farmyard upset in every way.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's special guest is retired Major Bruce Doc Norton. So thank you, Bruce, for spending, or sorry, Doc, I know that you wanted me to call you that, so we'll continue with that. Thank you for coming on. Not only are you, a Vietnam Force recon veteran yourself, but you've written extensively about them, and you've published 15, you're just on your 15th book, which is phenomenal. Would we be able to start off the interview with one of the first books that you wrote about your friend who was involved with SOG? Because a lot of people don't realize or don't know that Marine Corps Force recon men were in SOG, some of them. So
Sure.
Can we go into that a bit?
We can. The gentleman you're referring to is Donald Hamblen, Woody Hamblen. His nickname is Woody. Woody was with SOG for 21 months. Interesting story. He'd been a Korean War vet, stayed in the Marine Corps, and in 1963, he was making his 210th jump over Camp Pendleton. He got blown into 369,000-volt high-tension lines, was electrocuted, set on fire, fell 40 feet to the ground, survived it all, taken to the hospital, and they amputated his leg because of the burns on his feet, and also on his right thigh where his 45 was. He had to have multiple skin grafts. Anyway, to make a long story short, he went up to Oakland, and the policy with the Navy at the time was, we have 90 days to return you to a duty status where you would be medically retired from the Marine Corps. And he didn't want that. They had him deal with the prosthesis and the fitting for prosthesis. And he got back to the company area because you had to demonstrate that you could drive an automobile, which he did. And he went to the company commander, Pat Ryan, and said, I want to stay on in the Marine Corps. I've been a Pathfinder. I've been a grunt during the Korean War, wounded twice, and multiple jumps, and also scuba school trained NCO. And he said, geez, I don't know if they're going to allow that. He said, well, I want to see the commanding general. So they arranged for it, and General Nickerson said, what can I do for you? And he said, look, I've only lost a leg, and I still can function as a Marine, and I bring a lot to the table. I mean, you trained me for years, and give me a shot. So General Nickerson said, okay, if you can perform the duties required of a Pathfinder platoon sergeant, I'll consider allowing you to stay on active duty. So in one morning, he performed the physical readiness test before it was called a physical fitness test. And he had to run with a pack and, scale a wall, use a rope to swing over a ditch. And then it was a 3-mile run with pack and rifle. And at the end of that, he took off his artificial leg because the stump by the knee had split, and of course he poured blood out. They bandaged it up, and they said, okay, that's test 1. Now we're going to put you in an aircraft, and you're going to do a soft jump, which is a water jump, into Lake O'Neill, which is in front of the Naval Hospital there at Camp Pendleton. So he jumps in, makes the jump, lands in the water, gets out, dries off, and they take him down to Del Mar Beach, and he does a 130-foot open ocean dive with scuba gear. And he does this by like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So what else you want me to do? And they said, well, that's enough. So ultimately, he stayed in. He went to Washington, D.C. as a guest of President Johnson and met Edward Muskie and Margaret Chase Smith, who were senators from Maine, which is where Woody was from. He was raised as a Quaker in Maine. And at the end of this week, it used to be called National Handicap Week, which today is politically incorrect, but that's what it was called back then. And they said, what, of course, he meant the commandant of the Marine Corps. And that was General Greene, who had come from, I believe, New Hampshire was his home. So he get a couple of Yankees in the room, and he said, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I'd like to go to Vietnam. We were training to go on this jump that I get injured on to Okinawa and then follow on to Vietnam with First Force Recon. And he said, okay, we'll see if we can't make that happen. And ultimately, he showed up at Da Nang, and that's not true. He showed up at Saigon, and he had orders for MACV SOG, which is Marine Advisory Command Vietnam Studies and Observation Group. That's the name of the acronym. So I've got, I don't want to read from his book, but I just refreshed my own memory as to what they did, the number of different nationalities that were there. They had Swedes and Germans and Americans, Italians. It was very, very interesting. And that they operated, of course, in North Vietnam, in China, in Laos, and Cambodia. So they were literally all over the place. And his team was really a platoon of South Vietnamese, we'll call them South Vietnamese Marines, but most of them had come from North Vietnam, didn't like what was going on, came down south, joined the South Vietnamese Armed Forces, and were very, very desirous of going back to North Vietnam and helping out any way they could to eliminate the North Vietnamese presence. And most of the time, because this was out of the port of Da Nang, they went by what was called a nasty boat, Norwegian, kind of like a PT boat, and then would go in by IBS, the silent running rubber boats ashore. And Woody would normally stay. He didn't go on all the missions because they were forbidden to participate by going ashore. But he did on a couple of occasions, and he writes about that. But normally he as the advisor, would be able to direct naval gunfire, artillery if they were in a particular area inside the DMZ or south of the DMZ, and air. So that was the value that he had. And then, of course, General Nickerson was now the force commander. So First Force was reporting to him. And Woody would share his information with First Force Recon, and General Nickerson got his pound of flesh out of Woody by telling him, I want you to meet me at my command headquarters, and we're going to go out to the hospital ship Repose, and I want you to meet with men who had lost an arm or a leg or both arms or legs, and show them that they can fully function with the correct prosthetic devices, which we write about in this book. And very interesting time for Woody, having to tell people who had been badly injured that they would be okay. And I won't get into the specifics of it, but more than most people can endure, as far as trying to convince another human being that you'll be fine when you've lost both legs or your eyesight.
Yeah.
Or, and it was just, he's just a remarkable guy, and he's still alive. He's married to his wife, Reiko, and I think she's 92 or 91. He's 91, and he's out in Vista, California, very close to Oceanside.
So just to take a step back, I'm not sure. Have you ever read this book here? I'll let you get your glasses on.
I did. Hang on 1 second.
Spies and Commandos.
I have not read that.
Okay,
No.
so this one is for you, a must read. How America, well, this is what it's called. How America lost the secret war in North Vietnam. Not the best part of that, but what it goes into is all about the different teams. So here is one of the MACV SOG, you know, South Vietnamese commandos who got caught, and he was on team Neptune. And
Okay.
so it really talks about like you know, Remus and Neptune and all these other things, you know, and it's been really neat to talk to some of the guys who were on the boats, the nasty class, and technically these Americans didn't go north of the parallel there, but we all know that that happened. And but this book is really good. It goes into great detail. Now I'm not sure if you can see this picture here, but this guy here, Francois, he turned out to be a traitor, and he was the reason that a lot of the MACV SOG men got killed, because he was telling the enemy where they were going to be.
I've heard these stories. Yeah.
Yeah. But so you were telling me that you know, Woody, that here's another picture of one of the divers.
Okay.
So you know, these Navy you know, frogmen, they would you know, take them up, like you said, in the nasty class, and then they would give them like a rubber dinghy there to go on shore. And before we went live, I asked you if you knew Mr. Norman Jennings, and he was in Force Recon, and he was also attached to SOG in a training, you know, facility, and he's been of great help. So he's lent me this book. Where there he is there. There's Woody. I'm not Woody, sorry. There's Norman.
Jennings. Yep.
And he would say that you know, that he demanded that on the runs that he went on, that there was another American, because he said, if I get shot, he said, you little guys are not going to be able to carry me out. And so yeah, I'm going to do a story about him in one of my books in the future. But you were telling me that Woody, that he was in charge of Team Remus. Is that what you said?
Romulus.
Romulus, right?
Here's if you can see this. Let's see if I
Oh
can
yeah,
get.
yep,
All right, so that's his team.
right.
Here's some more photographs of Woody in DC with a little team. But let me get a couple of other photographs you can see. So there
Wow,
he is,
right.
worked with.
Now, the other thing that the listeners might not know is that they also used the Swift boat, which you had the picture of there. So
Yep.
what one of my you know, contacts who was in NAD, so he was a, you know, a radio operator, and he said that they would meet in the nasty class, they would meet the Swift boat at the actual entrance to the river, and then they would get onto the Swift boat and go up the river.
There's a picture of Woody,
Wow.
and that's well, Woody and Reiko.
Japanese wife. Wow.
And in fact, what Woody would told me was lots of times they would be vectored in. They'd have a submarine or a destroyer, and they have a whip antenna up, and they would vector these guys in left, right, up a mouth of a river to get in the fog. And they liked it, you know, middle of the night, no one's around, everyone's supposed to be sleeping, and that's one of the ways that they would vector them.
Yeah, you know, excuse me. Norman was also telling me that you know, they would go and grab you know, fishermen as well, and take them to I think it's Quan Tre Island, and that's where they would you know, pretend that they had been taken far away, and it was like a you know, a psyop thing where they would feed the you know, the fishermen and give them a radio and stuff. It was really quite interesting.
Well, It's amazing stuff when I read about it. You can see there's a chapter dedicated
Oh,
to
wow. Yeah.
job duty in Vietnam in that book. And of course, I didn't know Woody till after Vietnam. We shot a lot of trap and skeet together at Camp Pendleton, along with Maurice Jacks, uh, and another one of the guys in Woody's book, J.J. Brown, who was in First Force. So it's a small family, and once you get to know these uh, gentlemen, the stories are so similarly true about different things that occurred. Everyone kind of nods their head and said, "Yeah, I can relate to that." But we didn't do nearly the clandestine things that MACV SOG did.
Now
But
that book,
sorry,
sorry to interrupt you. That book that you just showed us, can you show me the front cover? And now can people still get that on Amazon and stuff?
absolutely.
Okay, that's great.
One
Now,
tough dream.
and that's one of the 15 that people can access.
That's
So
correct.
here's the question.
Okay.
So you were, so can you tell us a little bit about what you did during the war?
Sure. Um, I enlisted in the United States Navy. I was in my second year of college, uh, and was kind of floundering around. As you can imagine, uh, everyone's parents did not want their son or their daughter to go to Vietnam for obvious reasons. So they wanted them to stay in school. Um, I was one of those guys who was in school and had no particular specific goal in mind, if you would. And I've said this before, is brought to light by a professor who said, "Mr. Norton, never have I seen anyone work so hard and have so little show for it." And so that's kind of the writing on the wall. And I went down to enlist. I was going to enlist in the Marine Corps. I had a couple of friends back home who had already been up at Caisson, uh, Charles Hopkins and Pat Sullivan, uh, and they had told me about their experiences. So as a young enlistee in the Navy, they sent me to Hospital Corps School at Great Lakes, and then down to Camp Lejeune to Field Medical Service School, where corpsmen are trained as to how they would function in a Marine rifle platoon. And that school was run by Marines and corpsmen who had already been to Vietnam. So there was no question as to the authenticity of the instruction there. I left Camp Lejeune after a couple of months there, and went to Naval Hospital, Newport, Rhode Island. So I was sent right back home, which is not what I wanted. Join the Navy and see the world, and here I was, 35 miles from where I grew up. So several of us who had already incurred debt to colleges said, "Hey, look, the only way out of this thing is to volunteer for Vietnam. You get combat pay." Uh, so we volunteered. And when we did that, we were taken, I worked on a dirty surgical ward, a 22-bed ward, and we were taken down to the emergency room. So we worked with doctors who had already come back from Vietnam, who'd been with Charlie Med or First Med Battalion. First Medical Battalion was with the First Marine Division, and Charlie Med was Third Medical Battalion with the Third Marine Division. They had already done time there or on one of the hospital ships, the Sanctuary or the Repos, and they wanted us to be exposed more to trauma and emergency type things. That didn't happen very often at the Naval Hospital, but the patients were primarily Marines who had come back from Vietnam, who lived in the New England area, because they would send you to the closest hospital to where your home of record was. And they would tell us stories about what they experienced in Vietnam. So I volunteered for Vietnam and got there in July of 1969. And I know that specifically because I was out on a mission when we heard over the radio that Neil Armstrong had stepped foot on the moon. So, not much we could do about it. We never saw it happen, but we heard about it on the radio. But anyway, I checked in with the division surgeon's office, and this office pogue said, he said, "Look, welcome aboard. Do you know how to swim?" I said, "Yeah, I know how to swim." He said, "Are you afraid of height?" And I said, "Well, not particularly enjoy being up high without some kind of support." He said, "Well, the reason I'm asking is last night we lost a corpsman over at 3rd Force Recon in a rocket attack, and he's been medevaced out, and we need to replace him. But you need to volunteer for that." So I said, "Okay, I'm here for 13 months, so, let's do it." So they chopped me over to 3rd Force. I went to 3rd Recon Battalion to spend the night because 3rd Force was located just on the other side of a hill from them, and reported in on I think it was on either a Sunday or a Monday morning. And the reason I remember this was corporal by the name of Vincent Swiderski was told to take me around to the different shops within the company so that I get my gear, be assigned to a platoon, meet the platoon sergeant, the company gunnery sergeant, and the first sergeant, and try to get acclimated as quickly as I could because it was hot. Summertime in Vietnam is suffocatingly hot, no different than Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, that kind of heat and high humidity. 3 days later, I was with a 7-man reconnaissance team going out across the demilitarized zone. So on-the-job training came very, very quickly. So my job was as a team corpsman. And of course, when you're new, brand new, you are told you do not talk in the bush. You will be told when to move, when to eat, when to sleep. Don't do anything unless things go very, very badly. And then, then you go to work as a corpsman. So that first mission, we discovered a series of bunkers that had anti-personnel and anti-tank mines in it. We left there and broke an ambush. We had multiple firefights over a couple of day period. We were chased by the NVA. The helicopter that came to extract us got hit with an RPG-7 rocket-propelled grenade in the back. We get out of there without any trouble, but had to take 250 caliber machine guns with us. Got into a second helicopter and watched as Phantom jets came in to bomb the CH-46 that we were in to destroy it. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I still have, 12 and a half more months of this fun to go through. So that was my initiation to 3rd Force. And I would tell you this, the Marines that I served with were phenomenal, and the officers were great. Alex Lee was our company commander. Norm Heisler was the XO, and our operations officer was Bucky Kaufman. And I'm sure you're aware of the decoration system for the United States military. When I met First Lieutenant Clovis C. Kaufman, he'd come up from the ranks of private to gunny. I think he was acting first sergeant at one time. He had already received the Navy Cross, 3 Silver Stars, 5 Bronze Stars, and 7 Purple Hearts.
Wow.
So all of these guys had multiple tours in Vietnam, skilled in the jungle, and they were teachers. It was a father-son, teacher-student relationship, and we had classes all the time. When we weren't in the field, we were back in the rear, and there were classes on the radio, on new equipment, new techniques and tactics. It was never ending. We practiced called IA drills, immediate action drills, where you would get all your gear on. You would load up with blanks. Other people were designated to be hidden around the company area, and they would ambush you, front, right, left, rear, and how you responded was how you trained. So that if and when it actually happened in the bush, you were pretty much prepared on how to deal with it. I mean, things change rapidly in a situation like that, but these were the things that you were supposed to do to break an ambush.
So
So the
I
training
do
was great.
I do have one question. Well, I have a few, but we'll start with one. And that is, at what point, like, are you a corpsman first before you're like grabbing your rifle? I mean, at what point when you know that you're under attack and you see the bad guys coming towards you, and you've seen someone who needs your attention, like, how do you balance that?
Well, interesting question. This was not like uh, conscientious objector that didn't carry a weapon. I carried an M16
Yeah.
and a 45 with me all the time. Sometimes that deviated. I carried an M60 machine gun on a couple of patrols, Swedish K9mm blowback machine gun, or submachine gun. Um, it depended on what the mission was, where we were going, how long we were going to be there. But I was a corpsman, but I was also, quote, a rifleman within that team. So it depends on the moment.
Right.
If it's an ambush and no one's hit, then you're a rifleman. As soon as someone gets sick, injured, wounded, or killed, then you're the corpsman.
So
So
it
you
must
have the medical say so over the team leader. And that brings up another point. Our team leaders were sergeants and corporals. Officers rarely went to the field. There was one occasion on uh, 18 long range patrols with Third Force where a lieutenant went with us once. I know that Alex Lee went to the field, the company commander went to the field, and they would do this, and Bucky Kaufman did as well, to do an operational check on a new team leader to make sure that he knew what to do, how to read that map and compass correctly. And they would just go out as a rifleman, as part of that team, and watch this team leader uh, lead that team on a particular mission.
Now, I guess so when you're in battle or in combat, I suppose you kind of have a triage thing. And as unfortunate as it is, if somebody that you know is not going to make it, and there's somebody else who you know that you can help, that must be very difficult as well to do the
Well,
triage.
I say I'm sure it is, but I never had that situation. I never lost anyone in the field,
Wow.
ever. Um, I had medevac guys for different reasons, but no one ever died on me, which was great. And I didn't have to make that kind of a decision. The hard fact is, if you're dead, you're a liability. You're not an asset. If you're wounded, you're also a liability because now two other guys have to carry you, and you've lost your effectiveness of six guys. Now you're down to two or three because it may require two people to carry a wounded individual, and that means um, day and night until the weather breaks and you can get out of there or find an area where a medevac bird can come in. And to the credit of these young dust-off pilots, they would come in night or day. It made no difference. If they could fly at all in bad weather, they would say, they knew where we were. I mean, we were being tracked all the time by large maps in the COC, and they would have a controller from them with us assigned to the COC, Combat Operations Center, within the company. So they would vector that helicopter out to the last known position of the team, and that pilot said, when I'm over you, you give me a mark on the radio. I'll throw on my landing lights and set it down, or drop a jungle penetrator and hoist the wounded out. So And what you did in the meantime was you split up the guy's food and ammunition and water because he wasn't going to need it. And he would go off with his weapon and he was gone. And he was at 85th Evac Hospital within an hour, which was the great life-saving benefit of having young warrant officers flying dust-off helicopters. They were fantastic. And what a morale factor that is. If you knew that you were going to be in the hands of a doctor within an hour of being wounded, that's pretty comforting news.
Now, you just hit on something that I was going to bring up. I was watching a TV show, and they were showing, they during the Afghan war, and they were following a chopper that was medevacing people out, and they said they call it the golden hour. So you just pressed on that, and within that hour could you explain that? That you probably have a better terminology than I do.
Well, sure. Okay, let's say you get shot in the shoulder. Okay, that's not going to be as critical as a chest wound, where you can stop the bleeding and plug up the hole and keep this man alive, but he needs to be in the hands of a surgeon within an hour. And that helicopter will fly out there as fast as it can go, pick that individual up, because it would only have a pilot, co-pilot, and one guy on board who was armed with a carbine usually, and a medic, and they would perform any and all life-saving techniques to keep this guy alive. And of course, you can see it's complicated if there are 2 or 3 or 4 wounded, then you're going to need a larger helicopter, and it may require a larger landing zone for a CH-46 to come in or multiple Hueys to come in. Again, you can see how compounded it can be with multiple casualties. So we felt that we get out of it easily dealing with 1 or 2 individuals. Imagine being a corpsman, doctor, or a nurse in a triage unit when a helicopter lands and there are 14 or 15 people brought in, all suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Again, who do you turn your attention to? I mean, the doctors go through very quickly and say, this individual is not going to make it. This guy will get him into surgery. This guy can hold on for another 5 hours and then he'll be next. Or, I'm making this up, but, you can see how fast a trauma unit has to identify and classify someone who is sick, wounded, or on death's doorstep.
Right.
So those are the decision makers there. It wasn't so much the corpsmen. They would do as much as they could to keep someone alive and into a helicopter to get them out of there, into a doctor. And then it's up to the triage people to take it from there.
I know that with your interview with Zach that you talked about what you carried in your, not tool belt, but on your medical pack, as it were.
Right.
And I liked how that you carry brandy, small little containers of brandy, right, just to take the edge off. And it, I could see where that would really help. And you were saying that in the morning that if you were out there and you wanted to have a coffee or something, or that it would just, like you said, take the edge off. And then you also had, morphine. And to those people who don't know, with morphine, that whether it be World War II or Korea or Vietnam, someone like Doc would have to write on their head that they had morphine, correct?
Correct.
Right. Because, too much morphine and it's going to kill you. Right. So.
Right. We had, well, let's see, a backup with morphine and the stuff we carried. The brandy, you'd get maybe like 2 or 3 little bottles, the airline type, remember those small bottles, 1.5 ounces of brandy. So you'd make coffee, was usually just a canteen cup full of hot water with instant coffee, and you dump in a bottle of brandy and pass the canteen cup around just to break the monotony of terrible tasting Nescafe whatever it was back then, Maxwell House or Folger's Choice. And I mean, that was once out of 7 days that you might do that. The stuff that we carried in the Unit 1, that's what was the medical bag was called. And it was a tri-fold canvas waterproof bag with 3 zippered compartments in it. And you would carry things like hemostats to clamp down on bleeding, tongue depressors, gauze, tape, salt tablets, anti-malaria tablets, um, anything that you could think of. And that was also based on other corpsmen. And you would ask them, what do you carry in your Unit 1? Well, this is something I needed and didn't have. So we'd always learn from these lessons learned and think, wow, I never thought about that. I'll carry these things with me. So on the back of every Marine and corpsman was a first aid pouch. And in that pouch were multiple bandages in case you would use their bandage first before you get into your gear. I would carry a plastic cigarette case. A lot of guys that smoked would have these plastic cases because it rained so much and you didn't want a soggy pack of Camels or Marlboros. So you'd carry a box of morphine, and it just looked like a miniature tube of toothpaste with a wire needle, like an inverted coat hanger, down the stem of that toothpaste tube. And what you do is you push down on that coat hanger type piece of metal that would puncture the morphine, and then you would inject it into their side of their arm or their leg. The only thing that you would not do is give morphine to someone with a head wound.
Why?
Well, because of the increase in pressure on the brain.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't done. I don't know if you've ever had morphine administered, 1 steroid of morphine, and it might be, I don't know, 1 cc of morphine, maybe 1.5. Suddenly, as soon as it's injected, this warm glow starts at your head, and you can feel it going right down your body and relieves you of any and all sensation of pain. What you can't do is give multiple shots of this stuff. I mean, it's going to wear off in a number of hours, and you've got to watch the person you give it to. But you would carry, we didn't have like magic markers back then. We had little ampules of like mercurochrome that you would mark on the forehead with a T for a tourniquet or an M for morphine. So that when they dragged you out of the helicopter and brought you to the triage unit and they took off a bush cover or a helmet, or you looked at the man in the face, you would look to see what was on his face if he was marked in any way. Because in the grunts or in the field, a lot of these corpsmen had the time to make out a medical tag, and it would say, this guy was wounded at this time. This is what I found, shot through the chest. He's got an exit wound in the back, or the bullet has remained in the body, or a fracture, splinted with they'd use an M16 as a splint. And of course, the big thing was make sure that the magazine is out of that M16 and the bullet that's inside the chamber has been ejected out, so you don't have a live M16 that could go off and shoot someone by accident, acting as a splint. So, I mean, those are stories that different guys will tell you who are corpsmen in a grunt unit. You could use bamboo, you could use wood, you could use anything around that's going to splint someone's fractured leg if that's what required, or the arm as well. So the leg was the same, length as an M16, and that's why on occasion it came in handy to do that.
Now, did you ever have to deal with like snake bites, or those centipedes? I know you have the horrible centipedes there that have the big stingers. I mean,
yeah, I did.
Ants as well. Leeches.
Leeches were common. Leeches were all over the place when you're out in the jungle, and it was not unusual to wake up in the morning and then have them on an eyelid or your face, or anything exposed, like your hands. Sometimes they get underneath your blouse. You'd have them on your belly or your sides or your armpits, and And normally, you didn't take your clothes off when you were in the bush. So you'd come back after 5, 6 days. The first thing you did was you dropped your gear, you went into a debrief so that everyone would sit around and they would say, this is what I saw and did, hour by hour. You carried a memorandum book to write down anything of consequence. So the debrief was total. Then you went to the showers and you'd stand there because you pretty rank after 5, 6, 7 days, and you check yourself for leeches. So leeches could be removed by insect repellent, which today is called DEET, and you just squirt it on, and the leech would fall off. But the leech also would had an anticoagulant, and it would leave a circular bite mark, which would continue to bleed. So one of the things you would carry in that unit 1 was a septic stick, the kind of thing that guys use if they nick themselves shaving, and they just apply it and it will cauterize a cut. So leeches were one thing. I personally never ran into like a poisonous snake. Didn't see one.
Lucky.
I did see on occasion pythons, and some were quite big, but we didn't have any interaction with them. I mean, these guys were smart, and if they saw one, they just walk around it. You don't bother me, I'm certainly not going to bother you. So that wasn't an issue. One night we were up on a OPLP, a listening post, an observation post, and a young Marine was in a dugout, 2-man fighting hole, kind of a bunker thing that Marines have been up there for a couple of weeks. And middle of the night, lets out this scream. So of course, I grab my unit 1 and go over there. And night discipline is everything. So you've got to cover yourself up with a poncho to turn on that light. And what happened? What's wrong? And he's holding on to his inner thigh, and you could see this big welt. And he was in considerable amount of discomfort. And there's not much you could give the guy. It didn't require morphine, but Benadryl, make him sleepy. There's nothing you could do, but you could see that it was a bite of some kind. So that morning, they were repositioning sandbags on top of this bunker. When they lifted up one of the sandbags, there was a centipede in there that had to have been probably a foot long, which is a huge centipede. And they got bigger than that. They got much bigger than that. There are photographs of centipedes that were probably 18 inches long and I would say as big around as half your wrist. That's a huge, huge centipede. Everyone thinks they're small, Well, not true. Well, this guy had been bitten by this centipede. And of course, now everyone was wide, bug-eyed with how many more of these things are around here. And, that was the only one that was encountered. But we saved it and brought it back and gave it to the med battalion. And they put it in a large bottle of alcohol to show people, what's out there, one of the things that were out there. So snakes, yes, on occasion. Leeches, yes, on occasion. Centipedes, on occasion. Tigers, on occasion. I had a teammate who was killed and eaten by a tiger, and that was in May of 1970.
Wow.
His name was Robert Craig Flager. He had just come back from getting married and was a team leader. He was a sergeant as a communicator, and they had been put in a position where they had to go up on the side of a mountain, and it didn't allow for them to sleep in what we call a harbor site, which was, everyone packed into the densest brush you could find so you wouldn't be seen or heard. They had to sleep head to toe on a ridge line going up the mountain. And this tiger had come in and picked up Flager by the back of the neck and killed him.
Oh.
And of course, then in the morning, of course, the Marines knew that the team leader was gone. There's nothing they could do. You can't call out his name. You can't turn on a flashlight. You can't fire a weapon. There's nothing to shoot at. All these things you cannot do for the sake of exposing the whereabouts of your team. So, in the morning, they saw the drag marks, found his bush cover that was bloody and his poncho liner, and they followed the drag marks down to a bush, I don't know, 50 yards away, and they saw his boots sticking out, and they went over, and a lot of them had been devoured by this tiger, which was still there, but on the other side of the trail. So they shot at this thing in typical recon fashion, shot at it and never hit it. And about a week later, another team was being extracted, and that was led by Larkins and Doherty, Lieutenant Larkins, Sergeant Doherty. And this is the amazing part. They were being extracted by a CH-46, and as they were getting on the helicopter, the sergeant sees this tiger charging at him at the back of a CH-46. He gets down into a kneeling position and goes on automatic and puts 18 rounds into this tiger. And of course, the team sees this out of the back of the helicopter, runs off the helicopter, cuts bamboo, and they have comm wire, and they truss up the tiger and run it on the back of the helicopter. Well, the thing is still growling and flopping around, and the pilot's saying, "Get that damn thing off the helicopter." They said, "No, get out of here." So he flew, and the word came over the radio, "Hey, they're bringing in this team." And of course, everyone gets down to the LZ, and they march this tiger here off the back of the helicopter.
Wow. It's good to have, and I know that you sent me that story. And I mean, I love cats, but when people see that kind of picture, and there is a backstory to it. Yes, there were many tigers that were shot for just fun because young guys, hey, there's a tiger. But I actually looked into this about 5 years ago, and I think there were 5 or 6 men who were killed by tigers, and clearly one of them was your friend. I mean, it's just amazing, and we're pretty easy prey, right?
Well, here's the thing. In Third Force, we were told that there were tigers in the Ashaw Valley, and it was just something to be aware of. I never saw a tiger in the bush, ever. I heard them at night, and they would bellow out, and you'd hear this roar, and then a couple of miles away, another one would answer his buddy, girlfriend, whatever, and literally the hair would stand up on the back of your neck. Primordial kind of a reaction to
Sure.
Hearing the sound of a predator like that. But I did see the pug marks, the footprint by a kind of a stream, a little pool where this thing had come down to drink. And that paw print was about the size around of a tennis racket. I mean, the paws
They're huge.
He's immensely strong.
Yeah.
So I know there was a Marine who was in a fighting hole up on the DMZ outside of Contien. He got grabbed by a tiger and mauled. He was medevaced to a hospital on Guam, and he survived it, but he really suffered for the rest of his life from what happened with this tiger. I've got a couple of other photographs of Marines that encountered the tiger, had killed it and skinned it and brought the skin back. So there were several of these encounters.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I never was a part of any of that, but I was there when they brought that tiger in at 1st Recon Battalion, and that was in May of 1970. And that photograph is also reproduced in Sea Tiger magazine, which was an in-country magazine for the Marine Corps.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, me personally, whenever I talk to you guys, of the veterans, I like the stories of snakes, tigers, and those kind of things. I mean, I don't like to hear about the leeches. They make me want to slide off. Yeah. So
but, you think about it. Imagine if you took 6 guys and you jumped in up in Vancouver Island or up in British Columbia, and someone said, "Oh, they've got bears up there."
Yeah.
and you think nothing of it. And then you encounter a grizzly bear or a mother grizzly bear with a couple of cubs. Well, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
So telling someone about it and experiencing it, quite different.
It's funny where I am. I'm very close to the U.S. border, by Blaine, Washington State.
Yep.
Within, I would say there was a cougar sighting within 20 minutes away from here, which is very rare. Bears, brown bears, probably about the same. You know, they're not around where we are, but within 20 minutes. Grizzly bear, that's probably two 2 or 3 hours away. My cousin owns a place, and there was a grizzly up there, and that's about 3.5. So yeah, I mean it, but it is rare, much like the tigers. But they know that you're there before that you see them, right? So
Yeah, and most of the time they don't want any part
no,
of a human, you know.
no,
But with a mother and cubs,
yeah,
she's there to protect them, and she'll do whatever it takes. If she feels threatened, uh, then the attack is on. So no,
yeah.
thank you.
So what I'd like to do is I try and keep these to an hour, these interviews, just so everyone stays fresh.
Sure.
So if we could talk about a pucker factor moment that you had during the prisoner snatch, and then after we talk about that, I'd really like to hear about what you're doing now with your new book and the play that's coming out that was that you told me about off air. So I'd like the public to hear about that.
Okay, sure.
So if we can
All
talk
right.
about,
So it was um, October of 1969. Uh, we had been assigned to a mission that was out near the Haivan Pass, which is north of Da Nang and south of Hue. We were up on a small hilltop overlooking a stream bed, and there were 6 of us. Team leader was Teddy Bishop, came from Lufkin, Texas. Donnell Kegler was from Nacogdoches, Texas. He was our point man. Paul Kevaney came from Florida, New Smyrna Beach, Florida. Myself and Guillermo Silva and James Furman. Silva came from uh, Flint, Michigan, and Jimmy Furman came from York, Pennsylvania. So we had practiced and been trained, should the occasion arise, on how to conduct what was called a Gurkha style ambush. The Gurkhas are fighting men out of Nepal, were tremendous in their victory over the Japanese during World War II. Small guys, but carried a kukri, curved knife with them, and were considered to be the best jungle fighters in the world. So the training goes pretty much like this. If you've got 4 or 5 people coming in your direction, I'm talking about military people on a trail, who is leading that group? Okay, it's not the first man, and it's not the last man. One is the point element, one is tail end Charlie. So he's pretty much walking backwards, trying to protect the rear of that group. So it's going to be number 2, probably number 3, maybe even number 4. But if you've got eyes on, binoculars on that individual, you're looking for what he looks like. Is he carrying a sidearm rather than a weapon? Is he carrying a radio? Is he carrying a map? Is he well groomed? Is he in the same uniform as everyone else? Indicators that maybe he's a little bit different, or he may be by hand and arm signals directing the point man. I want you to go to the right, left, or stop, to take a break, whatever. So we thought, here's an opportunity for us to grab someone for a couple of reasons. One, we'd get extracted out of there. We'd have a prize and we get extracted out. And there were always these rumors that you'd get a 3-day R&R in country, which was nonsense. But I mean, that was a rumor. So we thought, here's the great intel that you could get if you grabbed an NCO or an officer from North Vietnam, and off they went to be questioned. So we're watching these four people, and the team leader decides, let's pull off this ambush. And what that consists of is you have to have a trail that makes a very sharp right or left-hand turn. It's not going to be a straight line. And at the end of that trail, you're going to put your automatic rifle, whether he has got a machine gun, an M14 or M16, he's going to be an automatic. And he's going to have line of sight straight down that trail. Everyone else is going to line up alongside that trail, but hidden. And the team leader is going to be on the opposite side of the trail. So when, in this case, the third man passes by, he's going to spring up, tackle him, and at that moment, when your automatic rifleman sees the team leader across the trail, tackling out number 3, everyone opens up, and we dispatch of 1, 2, and 4. Now we've got our prize. He's bound and gagged, and we call in an emergency extract, and everyone's out of there because the team would be compromised if we just get rid of him. Got him out of there. Now we're kind of screwed because everyone in the world knows where we're at. So we're all in position, and it starts to rain. And I mean, of course, this is now October, the monsoons are just beginning, pouring down rain. And Furman is the last guy on the left, and they're coming from left to right. And he gives the freeze signal, which is just a clenched fist. Freeze, don't do anything. So slowly, the first 4 guys walk past us. They have no idea that we are there. We're hidden that well. The reason for the freeze was those 4 men were the point element of an NVA company of 64 North Vietnamese soldiers that walked between us and Ted Bishop. Okay. Now, they moved away and they went down to another draw, 400 or 500 meters away from us. And after it was over, a couple of things transpire immediately. 1, we were very lucky. 2, the rain had everyone slogging with their heads down, not looking up, and just continuing to march to wherever they were going to go to a little base camp they were setting up. 3, the discipline of our team, where no one fired around, no one stood up to surrender, no one yelled, let's take them, none of this stupid stuff that would have killed us all. We wouldn't have this conversation today if that had ever happened. Because 6 guys are not going to be able to defend an area against 64. That's not going to happen. So after it was over, we waited probably 10 minutes to make sure no one else was coming, another company, or, and they weren't. At least we knew they weren't. We got our gear back on, and everyone was shaking like a leaf because of the adrenaline rush of we had just literally cheated death and no one had done anything stupid, fortunately. So yeah, talk about a pucker factor. That will definitely get your attention when something like that happens. And we're all, 19, 20, 21 years old, and in excellent physical condition. And I think the other part of that too is the mental acuity of rely on your training. Train like you're going to fight, but make it realistic. And if freeze is called by one guy, nobody moves an inch. So it paid off. I mean, it paid off tremendously. Now later we called in air and bombed that company with A6 intruders because they're all weather. They came in probably 2 hours later, and they had to scramble them out of Da Nang. Beef the mission, have them fly out. That A6 can carry 15,000 pounds of HE, and they dropped it right on them. And of course, The downside of that was we were required to go in and do what's called a BDA, a bomb damage assessment, and, and tell them how successful it was, which is not what we wanted to do at all, but we did it and got out of there.
Now that story, in more detail, is in which of your books?
Uh, yeah, Force Weekend Diary 69.
So as far as books, what is Doc up to now? Or what have you just finished? What's in the pipeline?
Okay. I just finished a book titled Voices from Vietnam. And that book supports a play that we wrote, we being Dr. Harry Kantrovich and myself. And it is a play based on the interviews, letters, vignettes, and reflections of Vietnam veterans. And when I say Vietnam veterans, we also include Vietnamese refugees and anti-war guys, because that was all part of it as well. So what it is 16 men and 8 women assume the role. These are professional actors and actresses. I'm talking about the play now. The play will be 2.5 hours long. It'll premiere in November here in Virginia. And so you go in, you're part of the audience, and what happens is the stage is set as a VFW hall and Veterans of Foreign Wars hall. And they usually have a bar down there, and all these old guys sit around telling war stories. So people will come in and they'll stand up and tell, either they'll be the recipient of a letter home, a mother or a daughter or a brother, because maybe that loved one didn't make it back, kind of thing. This is the last letter written by my son or my brother, or people that were helicopter pilots that came back and they talk about a certain episode in their life. And what you get is a cross section of what nurses went through, what helicopter pilots went through, what reconnaissance Marines or Army LRPs went through, or infantrymen, officers, NCOs, privates, or PFCs, Lance Corporals. And the idea is, the agenda is, we've got an entire generation of young men and women know nothing about what happened in Vietnam, let alone MACV SOG. But, they don't know. But once they listen to these stories, and these are all first-person stories, and these are not, bullshit sea stories of there we were 3 against 100. None of that is there. It's just not traumatic, but fascinating events as to what it was like to be a nurse in a hospital, first time, and what you're required to do, what it's like to be a doctor in a hospital, or a pilot, whether it's a fixed wing or the daughter of someone who doesn't come home. Yeah. We've got a gal, her name is Diane Carlson Evans, and she wrote a book called Healing Wounds about being a nurse at Pleiku. She is solely responsible for the creation of the three nurse statue at the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Now, she just had a cancerous kidney removed in Seattle in September, and now she's with her husband in a place called Flathead Lake, Montana, recovering, but she'll be out here for the premiere.
Well, that's great.
Another gal, her name is Colleen Shine. Her father was a A-7 Crusader pilot. He was shot down, and all her family got was a telegram from the government saying, sorry to inform you that your husband and your father was shot down, presumed to be dead. Goodbye, U.S. government. That's it. Mm-hmm. Then when she got older, and I'm not sure of how old she was, but let's just say 35, 40 years old, she went to Vietnam, was able to track the flight path of her father's jet, found the crash site, and recovered his helmet.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So she's going to be there. And that's in the book as well. So, now you remember the audience and you're sitting there listening to, 30 some stories in this play. what I did was I extended that and I wrote a book, and I had 61 people give me stories or multiple stories that I wrote about in the book. I did interviews, um, had letters sent to me, vignettes from guys and gals that were there, and reflections of now, 53, 54, 56 years later, these are my thoughts. And they share that with the reader. So that book will be published this fall. It'll come out in conjunction with the play. We have a Facebook site called Voices from Vietnam that gives us dates for the audition for those people that'd be interested in auditioning for the play, the rehearsal dates. Of course, that's all here in Virginia. And we think it's going to be successful. I hope so, because it's an educational trip when you can read first-person accounts of what it was like from different MOSs. We've got Australians, um, like I said, ground, air, and sea guys. It's all, and gals. It's all there.
I think what is amazing, and I thank you for coming on my channel here. I mean, I'm 50, I'm approaching 54. So my parents are, similar age to many Vietnam veterans. But what I'm seeing is that there's also a generation who's younger than me, who are about 30, who are very interested to hear your stories. So, that's what's cool. I mean, all you guys had a hard time coming home to a country that really didn't support veterans very well, and now it's nice to be part of movement to give you guys a platform to talk to or talk on, and also to promote any books that you're writing. So I think that's phenomenal.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll tell you, um, for anyone that's interested, uh, to me, it should be carried on. I'll have a birthday next week and be 76. Um, what about Desert Storm?
Yeah.
What about Afghanistan? Those types of plays and books need to be written as well, because I know very little about all the different things that happened in Desert Storm. I know what I read or what I saw on
Yeah.
TV, or the same with Afghanistan, the different provinces and all the different things that occurred in Afghanistan. I think that'd be a fascinating read as well. So I don't know if I'll be involved in any of that, but right now I'm looking forward to how well this play. And I'll tell you, we talked briefly about The Greatest Generation Speaks, and that play is in 150 theaters around the country, in Canada and in Puerto Rico. And we expect Voices from Vietnam to double that.
Well, that would be great. Just taking a step back, what is funny for me is, we talked about this off air, was that for myself, I've had the opportunity to speak to World War I veterans all the way up to Vietnam. And in my mind, including my own family, they were my grandfathers. They were always older than me. Now, the point in my life I'm at now, there are many, many veterans from Afghanistan, Iraq, who are much younger than me. And so what frustrates me on these, Veterans Days up in Canada, and I think they're great, of course, but they push so much on the First World War. And those veterans, yes, it's very important that we don't forget what they did, but we have our own veterans here who are having a really hard time, right? So I think energy needs to be put onto the men who are with us today as well, right?
Well, I'll tell you, the Australians and the Brits look at it sometimes differently than us, and they say, lest we forget. My grandfather was in World War One. He was gassed at Chateau Thierry. He was wounded outside of Verdun. And I'll tell you, back in 2018, I brought uh, the key to the North Gate of Verdun back to the mayor of Verdun and presented it to the mayor and the head of the Verdun War Memorial on Armistice Day at 11 o'clock on the 11th of November. And 35,000 Frenchmen were there. And that was just a keepsake that he had from World War One. So he was in World War My dad was in World War II. Sorry about the barking dog. That's a little 25 puppies that we've got. My wife breeds and shows Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. So that's one of 5 9-week-old puppies wanting to have dinner. But anyway, you're right. You're absolutely right. But I'm amazed because now it's an all volunteer service. No one's being drafted anymore. To sit there and listen to these younger guys, lots of times there's a common thread between all of us, of what people endured. But technology has changed a lot of that now. You'll never see another invasion like World War II. I don't think you'll ever see that kind of thing again. But it's all done scientifically, helicopters, ospreys will be able to move people in and out very, very quickly. Weapon systems that can fire, 20, 30 miles. Tomahawk cruise missiles can go for hundreds of miles and go right through the window of a particular target. It's fantastic, all the things that have evolved since then. But the stories are there, and there's something to be learned from every one of them.
There is. I think, Doc, that would be a good time to end this one. I'd like to have you on again in the future where we could talk more about some of your books and that kind of stuff. And I've really enjoyed the chat, and you're a very easy person to talk to, because some veterans are, you have to navigate a few conversations, right? And I've always told people, I really encourage people to talk to any veteran in your family or friends, but you have to go in there and take a deep breath and just be prepared that, you're going to dealing with somebody who's going to be quite tough, and don't just keep on going, and, and they will see that you have an interest. So I really encourage that.
Jason, I appreciate your time and your interest. And I thank you for it. The interview was easy, and I look forward to talking with you again. You set it up, and I'll be ready.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Until next time.
Okay, you take care.
You too.
Be well. All right, bye now.
Bye.